Hey, welcome to the Arts District podcast for episode 16. I'm Lauren.
I'm Georgia.
And I'm going to be talking about something or someone that I think is super inspiring and incredible. Today, I'm going to be talking about Charles Bradley. He's actually somewhat new to me. He's been around for musically and like popular culture. He's been around for since like 2011, maybe people have started hearing about him. But he's actually, I don't want to say old, but like he got into creating music and putting music out fairly recently, but he's older. Yeah, sorry, weird way to start that. But yes, Charles Bradley. Some of you may have heard of him, some of you might not have. I just found out about him within the last couple of months. Actually, my boyfriend Adam flipped me onto him. He's got one of his records around our house, so we put it on the other day when we were eating dinner, and he told me the whole story behind Charles Bradley and the record label that he's signed to, and I just thought the whole thing was super interesting, and I wanted to share that with you. So yeah, I've got like 3 pages of notes in front of me because he has such an interesting background, and it all kind of plays into the music that he creates. And I just think that, like I said in last week's episode, I really like reading musicians' biographies to hear how they got their start and what their lives were like before they really hit it big. And so when I read and when Adam was telling me about Charles Bradley's background, I was, captivated by it. I thought, wow, here's somebody who literally came from nothing and held on to his dream, and now is just, creating great music with great musicians, and people love him. So here we go with Charles Bradley. So he was born in Gainesville, Florida in 1948, I think it was. So yeah, like I said before, he's in his 60s now. The music that he's playing is funk, soul, R&B. He's been tied to being similar to artists like Otis Redding, which I definitely can see that comparison. He's signed to TADPodcast Records, which is an indie funk and soul record label based in Brooklyn, New York. They have a branch called, what is it? Dunham Records. And they also have a bunch of other R&B, soul artists on that label. So if you enjoy that kind of music, I definitely recommend checking out their website for more information on those artists. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've had artists like that in the past. I can't speak today. Like Amy Winehouse, and even to some extent the Alabama Shakes are definitely bringing back that soul element into popular music, which is really cool. I think for a while it wasn't really being thrown into popular music. Which is unfortunate. I love it. I love that kind of music. I just think it's super groovy. So back to Charles. He had a rough life. Growing up, he was raised by his grandma. His mom actually abandoned him when he was 8 months old and didn't really get back into his life until he was 8 years old. She invited him to come live with her in Brooklyn. And while he was living in New York City, he actually, I think his sister or someone took him to see James Brown perform at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, which is a legendary theater for R&B, soul, funk music. And when he saw James Brown, he was just floored, and he started practicing, how to sing like that and how to move like that on stage. So much so that he ended up forming this James Brown, or like, I don't know if it was James Brown cover band, tribute band thing, or if it was just music kind of in that style later on in his life. But before all of that happened, before he really got into performance, he struggled a little bit. When he was 14, he ran away from home. He was living in a basement with a sand floor, so living conditions were kind of poor. He ended up spending the next 2 years living on the streets in the day, and he would sleep on subway cars. So here you have like this 15, 16-year-old kid who's homeless, raising himself in one of the biggest cities in the world. Definitely the foundation there for a lot of interesting song lyrics, and it's sad, but he came out of it. Continuing on here with my notes. So after he did his time on the streets and in subway cars, he ended up living in Maine. He got recruited through some job, like one of those job things that find placements for people, and he ended up working as a chef in Maine. I think that was for like 10 years or so. And while he was doing that, some people heard him sing, and that's when he ended up forming this funk, soul, R&B band. They only had a couple of shows before the other members got drafted into the Vietnam War, so they never really picked that back up afterwards, and for a while he was just kind of doing his own thing. After he lived in Maine, he spent some time traveling, hitchhiking across the states, and he lived in New York, Seattle. He came up to Canada for a bit. I wish I knew where in Canada he lived. Probably on the West Coast somewhere, but wouldn't it be cool if he lived in like Hamilton or Toronto even? After that he went to Alaska, and he finally settled in California. He lived there for about 20 years, and he played a lot of his own solo shows, and I guess that's kind of when he really started to hone his own craft. In 1996, so by this point he's 48 years old, his mom asked him to move back to Brooklyn so she could get to know him better. What a time to do that. I mean, your kid's 48 years old and you just want to get to know him now. Anyway, so he ended up going, and he began performing as a James Brown impersonator at nightclubs and little venues around the city. His name stage name he went under was Black Velvet, which I just think is cool. So it was during one of these performances that he was actually spotted by the co-founder of Daptone Records, which is the label he's signed to now. And the co-founder, his name's Gabriel Roth. I'm going to say it's Roth. He kind of networked him with some of the musicians that are also on that label, and through them he started songwriting and jamming with more people and just, getting into his own groove. And the songs that he ended up writing during that time became his first album. In 2011, he released an album called No Time for Dreaming, which is 12 songs. So 2011, he's 63 years old. So like I said at the beginning, when he kind of came onto the scene at a later age, he was 63, like, I don't want to mention them in every episode, but Fleetwood Mac, they're 63 now, and they've been around for how many years? Like, that's the age usually when people are past, like, the climax of their career, and they're kind of on the fading out period. And here you have this guy storming onto the scene who's just, like, killing it, and he's new. And I think I just love that, It's nice to see older people still involved heavily with music, and especially when they can just they sell it so well. And like I spent half the morning today watching Charles Bradley videos on YouTube, and they're just so captivating. They totally pull you in. Like, I was just like, I couldn't look away. It was so good, and the lyrics are so powerful. And I think knowing his history and his background and what got him to this point in his life, you have a new appreciation for everything that he's singing about. And I like that, when you can kind of understand what they're trying to say. Like, even though the lyrics are fairly literal, you feel like you know what's going on behind the scenes, like reading between the lines. I think that's really interesting when people can do that with lyrics. So I'm really enjoying, diving into him and these records. This is the one that we have at the house. This is No Time for Dreaming. Came out in 2011. And it's super cool. They recorded with all analog equipment, so they recorded it to tape, no digital assistance whatsoever. And it sounds like a record that was made in the 60s. Like, that's why when we had it on in the house, I was like, Charles Bradley, like, he's like an old musician, right? Like, he's not out now. And I was like, no, this record came out in 2011. I was so confused because it sounds like vintage. It sounds authentic 1960s recordings. Definitely recommend checking it out. It's 12 songs, and the majority of which he was actually a writer on, and it's just a great capture of somebody's life and music, and how music helped them through the good times and bad, mainly the bad, because he had a tough life. Even that album cover, like, so 70s, so 70s in his onesie. So that was his first album in 2011. His second album, called Victim of Love, came out last year in April. I haven't heard too much from that one, but I posted a video on the Arts District Podcast Facebook page on Saturday for a song off that album. So I hope you watched it, and if you haven't, then definitely go check it out now, after the podcast, and watch it, and watch all of his other videos on YouTube, because it's definitely worth it. There was actually a documentary made about him. In 2012, it came out. It premiered at the South by Southwest Film Festival. It was called Soul of America. I haven't seen it yet, but definitely want to watch it, because it would just be really interesting and inspiring. And I like documentaries, especially music documentaries. Speaking of which, I still haven't watched Sonic Highways. Can you believe it? I'm so disappointed in myself. Tomorrow, Sunday, that's what I'll be doing. I'll be watching Sonic Highways. So that's pretty much all I had to say about Charles Bradley. I hope you were able to keep up with me during that little blurb about his life. Read about him online if you couldn't follow along. I know I kind of speak choppy. And yeah, if you really like funk, soul, R&B, groovy music, check it out. You're gonna love it. And I love that it's new. There was definitely a hole in music, and it's being filled now by Charles Bradley. I'm really excited to check out the other artists on that label too, and see what they've got to offer, and maybe I'll talk about them on a future podcast episode. So moving along.
So I had a few things I wanted to talk about. One thing that I just wanted to mention. Last weekend I was at WordCamp Toronto. WordCamp is sort of a community organized WordPress event. They happen globally, and there are just a variety of speakers and meetups that talk about web development using WordPress. I don't have a ton of experience with WordPress. I've never coded a WordPress site or anything like that. But this was kind of an interesting entry into that. I do have a little bit of coding experience, but this built on that for WordPress and talked about building functional sites that are easy to use. But it wasn't just that. I'd say anyone can go to these WordCamp events if they're interested in using WordPress to develop sort of an online presence or an online anything. And it wasn't just coding. I went to a marketing seminar. I went to a couple design seminars. I went to a typography seminar. I also did I say marketing already? Yeah. Also, there was sort of a intro on using Google Analytics to its best capabilities, as well as I also saw a talk on long form content, which was really interesting, talking about not moving away from sort of the fast, like Twitter world, but also getting into long form content. So people are again starting to read long articles online and stuff. So I went to a talk about that and it was really interesting. So yeah, I would definitely check out WordCamps. They happen all over the place. Luckily for me, WordCamp Toronto was at the Lakeshore Humber campus, so really close, and that's how I found out about it, through school. So I would definitely recommend checking out WordCamp. Next, I want to talk about something that I've been noticing over the past few weeks. Henri Matisse is invading everything. I don't know if it's just me that's been noticing this, but he seems to be everywhere, and I started looking into it, and it turns out the MoMA, Museum of Modern Art in New York City, is having a Matisse exhibition right now. It's sort of a huge exhibition of his cutout works. He did a lot of work later in his career that was based around gouache colored paper cut out and assembled either on paper or sometimes on walls. So that exhibition is running at the MoMA until February 8th, and I think it opened in October. So there's lots of time to check that out if you're going to be in New York. I guess a little bit of background on Matisse. He was born in 1869 and lived into 1954, so he was in his 80s, which is pretty impressive, especially for someone born back then. He's most associated with the Fauvists, or the sort of wild beasts. They championed expressive uses of color in the 1920s and just sort of breaking rules that were established in the art world at that time. And he was friends with Picasso and hung out at Gertrude Stein's house in Paris. So definitely in sort of a rat pack of awesome artistic stuff going on. And he had a super long career, which is amazing. So this MoMA exhibit is showcasing one work in particular, along with lots of others, but the one that they're most excited about is the swimming pool from 1952. The MoMA purchased it in 1975, but for the last 20 years it hasn't been on display because of conservation issues. I guess it was actually created specifically for the dining room in Matisse's house. So these were papers stuck to the walls, and there's been some conservation issues surrounding that. So they have been restoring the work and considering how it should be presented and looking at its original setting and trying to recreate that in the gallery. So that's the big draw for this exhibition, is to see that work again. I also wanted to mention that so it's not just the MoMA exhibition that's bringing Matisse into sort of the public consciousness, but closer to home in Canada at the McMichael Canadian Art Collection in Kleinburg, they have an exhibition on October 10th, so it's been open for a few weeks, till January 4th, and it's actually curated and organized by Musée des Beaux-Arts du Quebec. I was about to say Paris. No, it's Musée des Beaux-Arts du Quebec. So it's an exhibition featuring not only Matisse's work, but also two Canadian artists. They're Montreal-born Maurice and Layman, and they were friends of Matisse. They sort of were expatriates in Paris around the time that he was in Paris, and they studied from him because Matisse did actually have a like school of Matisse for a while in Paris that people were studying with Matisse, and also these Canadian artists also met up with him when he was traveling. So yeah, this is a traveling exhibition that is luckily at the McMichael, so if you're in the area, check that out as well. I think I'm gonna try and check that out before it closes to get a glimpse into that, because unfortunately I'm not going to be able to get to the Matisse exhibition in New York because of school and life and things, but hopefully I can make it to the McMichael one to get in on that, because it just seems like Matisse is everywhere and I want to check it out. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing influences in other fashion and pop culture stuff. I think that happens a lot with these huge MoMA exhibitions. It sort of seeps into everyone's consciousness. So yeah, look into that if you can.
Just something I wanted to mention briefly. My sister's band, Winnie Brave, played at the Horseshoe Tavern on Monday, November 17th. And it was a great show. It was their first time playing at the Horseshoe Tavern. And what a legendary place. I mean, the walls there are covered with snippets, pictures, newspaper clippings of legendary people playing there. I saw Dave Grohl on the wall there. Apparently he did like a secret surprise show there, and I was like, can you imagine being at the Horseshoe Tavern and they're like, and next up, Dave Grohl. Like, oh my God. That would have been unbelievable. But anyways, Winnie Brave was great, and I've got some videos from the show. They actually threw a new song into the set. I don't know what it's called, but I loved it, and so I filmed what I could of it. I started kind of dancing partway through, so my video is a little bit shaky, but it just adds to the whole thing, I think. So I think I'm going to edit a little snippet of that and throw it in to our podcast. So here's Winnie Brave. Enjoy the snippet.
You stripped my little bed and left me down in the broken, and you took it all away and left me with what you did. Your cheap gin without all of mine, cream and dough. Don't go that smooth like a bottle of the good stuff here. Your cheap gin without the bottle, never win, and it took it all away. Let me with you till we were the worst kind of hard, the best kind of easy. You split my knocking knees, raised my racing heart. It was foggy and forgiving, left me suspended and waiting with a fixed nigga on your breath. Said you're gonna come home with me tonight. Oh yeah, there was cheap gin, and that's borderline cream and dough. Don't go that smooth like a bottle of
right, so hope you like Winnie Brave. If you haven't checked them out yet, they are on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I think just Winnie Brave, WINNIEBRAVE. We'll throw the links in underneath in the little spiel about this episode. Yeah, check them out, WinnieBrave.com, and I hope you enjoy their music. They play a lot in, Southern Ontario, Barrie, Toronto, Peterborough, Midland area. So definitely make it out to a show, and maybe I'll see you at one of them, and we can hang out and enjoy some good music. Support original music, people. Get out there and support people creating new music. That's what I want to say about that. And yeah, looking forward again to what Georgia's got to say this week. We haven't been able to get together, which sucks because I haven't seen her since Halloween. But time is just flying. I can't believe it's going to be Christmas in a month. Where does the time go? Speaking of time, I saw Inception last weekend. Or not Inception, oh my god. What was it called? Interstellar. And it was very interesting. Definitely made you think. Yes.
So the last thing that I want to talk about is an article I came across in this Vanity Fair magazine. I'm not usually a fan of Angelina Jolie, but this popped out at me. It's not in focus. It's Van Gogh, Suicide or Murder, Solving Art's Greatest Mystery. That jumped out at me in the grocery store. And pretty much in 2011, there was a book released by these two biographers, Stephen Neifel and Gregory White Smith. They wrote a book about Van Gogh and took about 5 years doing research to write about it. And then it was published in 2011. I don't know why I didn't find out about this in 2011, or maybe I've just forgotten. But there was a lot of controversy surrounding it because through their research, they concluded that Van Gogh probably didn't commit suicide. He might have been murdered. And obviously there was a huge uproar about this because legend tends to become fact in people's minds. And none of this is actually conclusive because not much evidence survives and accounts are few and far between and all change over time. But it's possible that there were sort of some teenagers in the area where Van Gogh had been painting. They'd been bullying him over while he'd been in the area, and one of them had a gun and potentially shot him, which solves the whole thing about the gun never being found. These biographers have also spoken to a ballistics expert who believes that where Van Gogh was shot and through a variety of factors, it's unlikely that he shot himself in that place. So kind of interesting to rethink about things we think we know about these historical figures, right? I just thought that was interesting and worth looking into more. I think I'd like to read this biography because obviously I'm interested in biographies of artists and musicians and stuff like that. So I think I'll check it out more and get back to you on that. But yeah, I'll post a link to this article because it was a good read and worth looking into more.
Okay, so that was episode 16. Thanks for hanging out with us again on this Sunday evening. Hope you had a great weekend, and here's to the start of a brand new week. All right, bye.